Have you ever noticed the most manipulative people? The ones who twist words, dominate every conversation, and play victim like it's an Olympic sport? Absolutely panic when you say nothing? Oh no, you're being quiet. Are you upset? No, Susan, I've just transcended your nonsense. Welcome to Buddhist Wisdom for the Elderly, where today's video exposes the one terrifying truth no one wants to admit. Silence disturbs the loud because it mirrors their emptiness. Now, some say staying quiet means you've lost the argument, that you're weak, defeated, passive. We disagree, with a small smile and a steaming cup of tea. This video isn't about shutting down, it's about waking up. We'll show you what silence really says. Spoiler, it's louder than your nephew's political rant. Why people fear it, stories of elders and monks who used stillness like a scalpel, and how to turn your calm into a presence so unsettling it should come with a warning label. And if you only watch one part, watch part 3, The Psychology of Panic in Your Silence. It'll show you how to reclaim your energy without lifting a finger, and why the quiet ones always know where the bodies are buried, spiritually speaking. So stay with us. Hit like, tap subscribe, help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers so we can keep making videos that serve your soul, not your ego. And remember, sometimes the strongest presence in the room is the one that doesn't flinch, speak, or explain. Part 1. Modern conversation is a boxing match with microphones, and you're the referee. These days, talking feels less like connecting and more like sparring in a debate club no one asked to join. It's all performance. Polished opinions, strategic interruptions, and a desperate hunger to be seen as right. People don't pause to understand. They pause to reload. And if you've reached a certain age, you've likely watched this all unfold with the quiet clarity of someone who's done explaining themselves. You've heard enough recycled outrage, enough unsolicited advice, enough monologues disguised as dialogue to realize most folks aren't speaking. They're self-soothing. Buddhist psychology calls this ego maintenance. Every word, every correction, every dramatic sigh is just another attempt to protect the identity they've built like a rickety altar. Because the real fear isn't being wrong, it's being nobody if no one responds. But you've come to value silence, not because you have nothing to offer, but because you no longer offer it on demand. While others scramble to dominate the airspace, you've become the still point in the storm. You don't need to interrupt to prove intelligence. You don't need to correct to feel seen. You've become something else entirely, the calm witness, the grounded presence, the person who no longer performs and therefore cannot be manipulated. And in a world that confuses noise with strength, that makes you terrifying, because when you no longer react, you start to command. Part 2. Stop explaining yourself. It's not enlightenment, it's exhaustion. At a certain age, you stop trying to win people over and start realizing you don't even like most of them. You no longer feel the urge to defend your every decision like it's a court case. You don't launch into PowerPoint presentations every time someone misunderstands you. You just breathe. Maybe raise one eyebrow, maybe sip some tea, but you let them be wrong. And that, my friend, is liberation. Not the incense-burning, bell-ringing kind. No. This is the type of freedom that comes when you've explained yourself for 40 years straight and realize no one was really listening anyway. In Buddhist psychology, the need to explain yourself is just a craving in disguise, a subtle itch for recognition, a performance for an audience that's already scrolling their phone. But the elder who's done explaining, they become dangerous in the most peaceful way. They walk into a room, say little, and suddenly everyone's nervous. Not because they're hiding something, but because they're not trying to prove anything. There's a power in presence that no monologue can match. And the older you get, the more you understand. Your silence isn't a lack of opinion. It's a refusal to waste energy. Let others chase the spotlight. You've already figured out. It's hot, loud, and burns the soul out of you anyway. Part 3. Why people panic when you say nothing, and how to enjoy every second of it. There's something almost delicious about watching someone unravel because you didn't give them what they expected. You didn't argue, you didn't defend, you didn't even blink. You just sat there, still, silent, sipping your tea like it held the secrets of the universe. And suddenly they're spiraling. Did I say something wrong? Are you judging me? Do you think I'm stupid? Spoiler alert, they already think you think that. You didn't need to say a word, they filled in the silence with their own paranoia. That's the thing people don't get. Silence isn't empty, it's a mirror. And most folks aren't ready to see what's staring back. In social psychology, silence in conflict is often perceived as judgment, but in Buddhist psychology, it's something deeper. It's a refusal to feed the illusion. You're not denying them your voice. You're denying them your energy. And when someone thrives on controlling the narrative, your quiet becomes the crack in their performance. Their mask starts to slip, and the best part? You didn't lift a finger. You just sat there, present, rooted, calm, while they crumbled in front of their own ego. Now that's spiritual efficiency. So the next time someone demands a reaction and you offer them stillness instead, don't feel guilty. Feel grateful. You just gave them their first silent meditation. They won't thank you for it, but their therapist might. Part 4. Stillness isn't emptiness. It's theater for the spiritually trained. Let's clear something up. Silence isn't passive. It's art direction. The way a seasoned actor can say more with a pause than with a page of dialogue. An elder can dismantle a conversation just by not participating in it. Stillness, when done with awareness, doesn't whisper, "I have nothing to say." It bellows, "I've already said it," with my presence. That's the trick no one teaches in communication skills class. If your silence feels hollow, it's avoidance. But if it's charged, that's presence, that's theater. That's spiritual stagecraft. Buddhist monks don't fidget when they're quiet. They settle like mountains. They don't need to speak, because they've become the echo people hear after they've stopped talking. And if you're older, you've likely felt it. Those moments where you didn't need to correct someone. You just watched them dig their own grave one sentence at a time, while you quietly poured the metaphorical tea and offered no shovels. That isn't passive. That's power dressed in stillness. In a world obsessed with fast takes and hot opinions, silence becomes a kind of rebellion. An exquisite, slow-motion mic drop. So the next time someone looks at you and asks, "Why aren't you saying anything?" just smile, because if you've cultivated presence, you've already said everything. They just haven't caught up yet. Part 5. They keep poking you because you keep leaking. Let's talk about emotional plumbing. You ever notice how some people just know where your buttons are? They push, and suddenly, there you are. Explaining, defending, bleeding out little emotional leaks all over the conversation, and they sit back like, "Ah, there it is, the good stuff." That's because you've been acting like an emotional juice box. Poke a straw in the right spot, and out pours your energy, your story, your need to be understood. It's not your fault. You were raised to believe that sharing was strength, that speaking up meant self-respect. But here's the Buddhist punchline. Reacting isn't always responding. Sometimes it's just bleeding in public. And manipulators, they sniff that out like sharks on a senior cruise. They thrive on your need to clarify, to smooth things over, to make sure no one misunderstands you. But here's a hard truth from the school of elderly wisdom. People who want to misunderstand you will. Even if you write it down, even if you say it twice, even if you diagram it with finger puppets. So stop giving them the satisfaction. Start sealing your leaks. Let silence become your boundary, not your shame. Let them guess what you're thinking. Let them squirm. Let them wonder. Because when you stop reacting, you stop bleeding. And when you stop bleeding, you become someone no one can poke holes in anymore. You become inconveniently whole. Part 6. How to say everything with an eyebrow and a sip of tea. Words are overrated. Sometimes all you need is one raised eyebrow and a perfectly timed sip of tea to say, "I see right through your nonsense, and I'm choosing peace anyway." This is what monks train for. Not just stillness of speech, but discipline and presence. Their pauses aren't empty. They're precision tools. You've got decades of experience. You don't need a script. You need a gaze, a moment, a breath so full of meaning it could write its own autobiography. In Buddhist monasteries, the most powerful teachings often come after long silences. Not because the teacher is stuck, but because the student needs to hear their own noise first. And that's what your silence does. It creates space for other people's chaos to echo loudly back to them. No need for a dramatic speech, just a glance over your glasses, maybe a slow blink, maybe a subtle head tilt that says, "You done?" This is the kind of communication that unnerves those who are used to controlling the narrative. They want noise. Noise is easy to manipulate. But presence? That's slippery, that's dangerous. So don't underestimate your silence. Don't water it down with nervous laughter or filler words. Instead, sip your tea. Let the pause linger just 1 second longer than what's comfortable. Because in that 1 extra second, you've already said everything that needed saying. And no one ever saw it coming. Not speaking up can be noble, or it can be you dying with a smile on. There's a kind of silence that feels peaceful, and then there's the kind that tastes like swallowed resentment, aged in the cellar of your throat for 30 years. Let's not confuse the two. A lot of people, especially as they age, confuse stillness with sainthood. I don't want to cause trouble. I'll just let it go. It's not worth the fight. But here's the kicker. What if you're not letting go? What if you're surrendering your truth, one bite-sized silence at a time? Buddhist teachings speak of wise speech, but that doesn't mean no speech. It means conscious speech, truth spoken when it's needed and withheld when it's not. But many elders aren't withholding out of wisdom. They're exhausted, conditioned, trained by decades of don't rock the boat culture until their inner voice forgets how to raise its hand. And suddenly you've got a lifetime of unsaid things and a smile that looks more like a mask. This isn't peaceful, it's passive. This isn't maturity, it's quiet despair dressed in manners. Yes, silence can be power. But if it's rooted in fear of upsetting people, being abandoned, or not being liked, then it's just another cage. So ask yourself, are you choosing silence like a monk, or wearing it like a muzzle? Because one leads to liberation. The other just leads to a funeral where everyone says she was so quiet, I wish I knew what she really thought. Part 8. You're not calm, you're just tired of getting yelled at. People often mistake silence for balance, but look closer. Sometimes it's just someone who's too drained to respond. This isn't tranquility, it's emotional fatigue in disguise. You've endured years of raised voices, closed ears, and long nights spent rewriting what you should have said. Now, instead of engaging, you withdraw. Not because you found peace, but because you've lost interest in the fight. There's a difference between groundedness and giving up, between choosing stillness and feeling backed into it. Buddhism teaches non-reactivity, not resignation. True presence comes with awareness, not avoidance dressed in courtesy. But many elders aren't pausing out of wisdom. They've simply grown tired of trying to be heard in conversations that echo more than they land. And when people call that maturity, they're just romanticizing near exhaustion. You've been quiet so long, others assume you agree. They don't notice the restraint. They don't see the history behind the silence. They only see someone who won't interrupt, so they fill the space with their own noise. But stillness that comes from depletion isn't stillness. It's spiritual depletion with a name tag. It's time to stop calling silence strength when it's actually surrender. The calm that heals doesn't erase you, it includes you. So speak, deliberately, not constantly. Make room for your voice without asking permission, because lasting peace doesn't come from staying small. It comes from standing rooted, even if your words are few. Part 9. When you stop explaining, you start evolving. At some point, the urge to clarify fades. You no longer chase after misinterpretations, hoping to clean them up like spilled soup. You realize most people hear what they want, no matter how carefully you phrase it. So you step back, not out of pride, but because the effort doesn't match the outcome anymore. There's a different kind of growth that begins in that silence. Not the reactive kind, where you defend every move, but the kind where your energy stops leaking into pointless conversations. This is where Buddhist wisdom meets lived experience. You start valuing attention like currency. You spend it wisely. You don't explain your choices to those committed to misunderstanding you. That isn't cold, it's efficient. Some will misread it. They'll say you've become distant. They'll call it detached, withdrawn, maybe even arrogant. Let them guess. You're not in the business of maintaining other people's comfort at your own expense. The truth is, explanations often come from fear. Fear of being judged, of being left, of being seen the wrong way. But if you've been through enough, that fear burns out. And what's left is clarity. You don't owe anyone a detailed breakdown of your soul. When you stop talking just to keep others comfortable, you give yourself permission to grow without a spotlight. And that kind of transformation, it doesn't come with applause. It comes with peace. And that's worth more. Part 10. 3 real stories where saying nothing said everything. Story 1. The widow at the wake. At her husband's funeral, everyone kept asking if she was doing okay. She just stood there, silent, eyes soft but unreadable. No tears, no rehearsed speeches, no apologies for her stillness. Only later did someone whisper, "She's not grieving, she's free." That silence? It wasn't sadness, it was liberation nobody expected. Story 2. The father at the dinner table. His adult children were bickering about politics. Loud, righteous, exhausting. He didn't interrupt, didn't correct, just reached for the salt. When one of them turned and asked, "Dad, what do you think?" He paused, looked at them and said, "I already did all my fighting, now I just like my food warm." No one said a word after that. Story 3. The caregiver's choice. She worked in a hospice. New nurse came in, full of ego, telling her how to do her job. She didn't argue, didn't defend. She quietly continued washing the patient's hands, slow, deliberate, tender. That nurse watched, fell silent. Sometimes, the best correction isn't a lecture. It's an example you live without needing to explain. These aren't just stories, they're reminders. You don't always need the last word. You don't need to win the argument, correct the facts, or offer a final quote. Sometimes, silence delivers the deepest truth. Not because it hides what you think, but because it makes others finally hear what they've been ignoring in themselves. Part 11. The strongest people don't die with applause, they die with reverence. The world celebrates noise, big exits, grand finales, speeches that drag on just long enough to make someone check their watch. But the ones who leave the deepest mark, they go quietly. No fireworks, no farewell tour. Just a presence so rooted, people don't realize how much space it held until it's gone. You've probably met someone like that. An elder who didn't talk much, but when they did, everyone listened like it was the last candle being lit. Their words weren't frequent, but they landed. Their life didn't scream, it hummed. Buddhist wisdom tells us, the loudest part of a bell is the echo after it's struck. And that's how some people live. Not to impress, but to remain. Not through noise, but through depth. When someone like that passes, people don't say he was the life of the party. They say, she saw things no one else did. She made you feel safe without ever saying why. He didn't speak often, but when he did, it stuck. There's a different kind of power in that. It doesn't get standing ovations, it gets silence, the good kind, the kind where people feel your presence long after you've left the room. So no, you don't need to shout your way through life to matter. Sometimes the most unforgettable person is the one who said the least but meant every syllable. Part 12. Silence as seduction. The magnetism of restraint. You want to know what really draws people in? It's not charm, not cleverness, not even charisma. It's restraint, mystery, presence, unshakable calm. Those things don't enter a room yelling. They glide in like incense, slow, quiet, unforgettable. We've been sold the idea that being interesting means being loud. Post more, share more, say everything. But the older you get, the more you realize what you withhold carries more charge than anything you reveal. There's a reason Buddhist monks feel magnetic. It's not the robes, it's not the chanting, it's that they know something you don't, and they're not in a rush to tell you. Same thing goes for that one elder in the family who rarely speaks. When they do, the whole table leans in. Not because they said something flashy, but because silence built the suspense. That's not absence. That's aura. In psychology, this is called the information gap. In Buddhism, it's just being. Being so present, so still, so self-contained, people feel pulled toward you, even if they can't explain it. You don't need to fill the space. You are the space. Let others overshare. Let them decorate their egos with noise. You wear silence like velvet. And that quiet restraint, that's what makes you unforgettable. Because true seduction isn't about exposure. It's about what you've learned to keep sacred. Part 13. How to be an unpredictable old man or woman. You know what's better than being respected? Being feared. Just a little. Not in a mean way. In the way that makes people pause before they speak, because they have no idea what you'll say, or worse, what you'll silently imply with a single glance. That's the secret perk of aging nobody talks about. You can become unpredictable, and no one will challenge it because they think you've either reached enlightenment or finally stopped caring. You ever notice the older folks who suddenly say something so sharp, so disarming, that the room goes quiet? And then they go right back to folding laundry like nothing happened? That's not luck. That's mastery. You're not required to play by the same social script forever. In fact, Buddhist teaching encourages shedding your old identities. So why not shed the one that says you always have to be polite, agreeable, and easy to read? Start speaking in koans. Answer questions with better questions. Smile like you know something they don't, because you probably do. Say less. And when you do speak, drop a sentence so precise it feels like it's been aging in a barrel for 40 years. People won't know if you're wise, tired, or slightly possessed. Perfect. Because nothing throws off manipulators, narcissists, or know-it-alls more than someone who refuses to be predictable. Be calm, be kind. But for the love of the Dharma, be confusing. Confusion keeps them honest. So here we are. You've just spent the last 15 minutes watching a video where silence stared directly into the eyes of chaos and didn't blink. You've learned that stillness isn't weakness. It's wisdom wearing slippers. That not reacting doesn't mean you've given up. It means you've finally decided your peace is more important than your performance. You've seen how silence unsettles those who thrive on control, how it exposes the noise in others, and how, when practiced with awareness, it becomes the most powerful statement you'll never have to explain. And if any part of this sank in, maybe that moment when you realized you're not calm, you're just chronically interrupted, then do yourself a kindness. Hit like. Leave a comment. Tell us how silence has shifted things for you. Subscribe and help us reach our 1,000 wise souls. We're not building a channel for noise. We're building a refuge for the ones who have something to say, but no longer need to shout. So here's your fortune cookie for the day. He who speaks may impress a room. He who listens may change it. Let's be the ones who change it. Quietly, intentionally, one breath at a time. Thanks for watching. This is Buddhist wisdom for the elderly, where sometimes the lesson isn't louder, it's just finally heard.